Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Premier Jason Kenney is in Washington and addressed the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy promoting Alberta's oil and gas sector. A number of Canadian law-abiding gun owners are angry over the Liberals' perceived backdoor long gun registry. Political reporter Brian Lilly will explain why. And Samaritan's Purse helped a number of Ukrainian refugees escape the war with Russia and have now made their way to Canada.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney is in Washington, D.C., addressing the U.S. Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. Kenney's in D.C. promoting our oil and gas sector, saying Alberta's energy is some of the cleanest around.
Senators, replacing conflict oil imports with Canadian energy is not a threat to the environment. We take seriously the need to cut emissions and to address climate change. Alberta's oil and gas producers and pipeline companies have some of the world's highest ESG rankings. Alberta was the first place in North America to implement carbon pricing. Through massive investments in clean tech, we've reduced the carbon footprint of an average barrel of Alberta oil by 36% since the year 2000 to below the global average for heavy oil. Our oil sands producers are committed to achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions in their operations by 2050, in part through a big expansion of our world-leading carbon capture, utilization, and storage infrastructure.
Education Minister Adriana LaGrange announced that Alberta schools can now move ahead and pilot 3 updated K-6 subjects this September. LaGrange says the updated draft curriculum will begin with science, French first language and literature, and French immersion language arts and literature. LaGrange says she's heard from Albertans and their concerns.
As promised, we have been listening to all Albertans throughout the curriculum renewal process. Between March 2021 and March 2022, Albertans from across the province shared their feedback on the draft K-6 curriculum, completing more than 34,000 online surveys and participating in 31 virtual engagement sessions in 5 regions across Alberta. And through approximately $1 million in grants, 12 partner groups engaged directly with their communities to hear their unique perspectives. This feedback, along with feedback from previous classroom piloting, was used to update the 3 draft K-6 curriculum subjects ready for piloting this fall.
The province allocated $59 million for the K-6 piloting and implementation process. The province is also investing $5.3 million in various post-secondary institutions across southern Alberta. The funding will support around 184 new seats in programs such as agriculture, healthcare, science, and IT at the University of Lethbridge, Lethbridge College, and Medicine Hat College. Government officials say the Alberta at Work initiative is helping high-demand programs to meet labor demands. Now, this is how the funding is being broken down. Of the $5.3 million, $3.7 million will go to the University of Lethbridge, $1.2 million will go to Lethbridge College, and $324,000 will go to Medicine Hat College. Alberta's Chief Firearms Officer has reached out to Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino, asking for the Trudeau Liberals to either delay or eliminate adopting a backdoor long gun registry. Terry Bryant says her office has been inundated with calls about Bill C-71 and how law-abiding firearms owners don't understand the changes and are concerned about the potential for a new backdoor long gun registry. The bill requires additional verification of possession and acquisition licenses for non-restricted firearms transfers and increased record-keeping by businesses. It's set to take effect on May the 18th. Political reporter Brian Lilly says many responsible gun owners will not be happy with this backdoor long gun registry, even though the Trudeau Liberals say they're bringing it forward to better protect Canadians.
The bill was one of these typical Trudeau gun control ones. You know, they say they're going to deal with crime on the streets by regulating law-abiding gun owners. And so almost every measure within it was aimed at people who are already vetted by the RCMP, who've done their safety course, background checks, et cetera. It came up with things that already exist. Like if you're going to sell your gun, you have to ensure that the person you're selling it to in a private sale has a license. You're already required to do that. They've just codified it in a new way so that they can say, see, we're making them do this.
Mr. Lilly will have more on Bill C-71, and we'll also discuss some big news surrounding the CPC leadership candidates. We'll have details coming up after business news. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says reconciliation will form part of the discussions Prince Charles and Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, will engage in during their visit to Canada. He did not say, however, whether he thinks the Queen should apologize for the legacy of residential schools. Trudeau was in St. John's, Newfoundland, in advance of the royal couple's visit to the province.
One of the things that we're looking forward to welcoming the Prince and the Duchess today and over the next coming days is an opportunity for them to hear from and meet with all sorts of Canadians from different backgrounds, including Indigenous Canadians, to talk about the things that we continue to need to work on, including on reconciliation. Reconciliation has been a fundamental priority for this government for ever since we got elected, and there are many, many things that we all have to work on together, but we know it's not just about government and Indigenous people, it's about everyone doing their part, and that's certainly a reflection that everyone's going to be having.
More than 260 Ukrainian fighters have been evacuated from a steel plant in Mariupol and taken to areas under Russia's control. Several buses were seen pulling away from the mill accompanied by Russian military vehicles. Ukrainian officials said the fighters had completed their mission and there was no way the country's forces could free the plant from Russia's grasp by military means. Russia called it a surrender since they've taken control of the southern port city. Meanwhile, Kalush Orchestra were greeted by cheering fans as they returned to Ukraine after winning the Eurovision Song Contest.
Відчуваємо велику підтримку, дуже раді, що нас так привітно зустріли і відчувається дуже гаряча підтримка, тому велика подяка всім українцям. Слава Україні!
A total of 28 Ukrainians touched down in Toronto recently, thanks to the generosity of Samaritan's Purse. The Christian organization helped fly the Ukrainians out of Poland on its DC-8 aircraft. They'll be staying with friends and relatives in the Greater Toronto Area, Winnipeg, Edmonton, Vegreville, and Regina.
We were able to welcome with sort of rounds of applause so that they really felt welcome in this country. And then in many cases, they had family and friends right there to pick them up. And in other cases, we drove them to hotels so that they could stay there and get their connecting flights from Pearson. Came done in a really incredibly short amount of time when I think about it. So I give so much credit to Samaritan's Purse staffers here and at our international headquarters for being able to pull together all the details. And of course, I give thanks to all our Canadian partners who finance all this, because in the end, they're the ones who brought these Ukrainians over to Canada. They just happened to do it through Samaritan's Purse.
Samaritan's Purse has airlifted more than 300 tons of relief supplies to Ukraine and surrounding countries since Russia invaded back in late February. Samaritan's Purse has also deployed teams to Seminole, Oklahoma, where so many regions are still trying to rebuild following devastating tornadoes on May the 4th. The teams are on the ground working with local officials, emergency management, and church partners to assess people's needs. We have more now in this report.
It lasted somewhere between 30 seconds to a minute that we were noticeably in the tornado.
We had carports and all that. It destroyed all of it and took it all.
Did what we could to calm the kids, and everybody kind of huddled in a circle and said a prayer.
When I heard the storm was coming, God protect us. That's all I said. Please protect us.
Samaritan's Purse is here on the ground in Seminole, Oklahoma, following a devastating tornado that ripped through the heart of this community. We are here helping homeowners recover by clearing out debris, cutting up trees, and tarping roofs.
You know, we didn't know how we were going to fix it, and when everybody just showed up and started pouring out all the blessings on us, it's an overwhelming amount of support, you know, like I said, from people I don't know. You know, that's awesome.
That's what we've been called to do as an organization, also as part of the Christian family. As the body of Christ is to get out and show that love, and that no matter what's going on, he's still there with us and in control.
Love to see the work that Samaritan's Purse continues to do for people in times of need. Well, here in our region in southwestern Alberta, it's been so dry, we need some moisture. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early peek at the weather forecast. Jeanette, any chance of shower activity to help our farmers and producers?
Well, Hal, they're going to have to wait one more day, but it does look like our farmers are in for some rain beginning Thursday, continuing into Friday. As for this evening, though, we're looking at mainly windy conditions. Winds from the west gusting at 50 kilometers per hour, gusting up to 70 That is going to stick around for tomorrow, Wednesday, 50 to 70 kilometer per hour winds from the west, high of 17, relatively seasonal for this time of year, mix of sun and cloud tomorrow. As for the rest of the week, we'll get into all those details about the rain coming up later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. The current state of the supply chain industry was discussed here in our city. The Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce hosted the event, and local producers were able to talk about some of their own concerns. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas was also on hand to discuss supply chain problems and what can be done to help at the federal level.
The Canadian manufacturers and exporters found that 9 out of 10 companies in the sector are grappling with supply chain issues.
There are 3 main reasons for supply chain issues affecting the industry. That is according to Lethbridge MP Rachel Thomas. These include inflation and taxation, the pandemic, and the war in Ukraine.
In terms of agriculture, in part because of the war in Ukraine, there are other factors as well, but we've seen fertilizer go up by 5 times. That's huge. And of course, again, coming back around to the fact that increases the cost for food production and then ultimately for the consumer at the grocery store.
Thomas says at a legislative level, there's a chance to assess regulatory burdens or red tape in the supply chain industry.
Whether it's around transportation or I guess domestic transportation, but also the export of goods. So for example, the infrastructure for an East-West pipeline would help with getting, our own product developed and to market. But also it would help alleviate the burden that is placed on rail.
Richard Thiessen, the general manager for Silver Ridge Construction in Lethbridge, says supply chain issues have been escalating in the construction industry since 2020.
Together with material costs, there's delivery costs, and then there's manpower costs that have all increased incredibly in the last 2.5 years, and we're seeing that there's scheduling issues on projects that we're running into, and we just have to be more upfront about that. It's just a reality.
A Stats Canada report that was released in March says nearly 1/3 of businesses expect difficulty acquiring inputs, products, or supplies domestically over the next 3 months. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The RCMP is asking Albertans to protect their homes and properties from any spring break-and-enters. They're now offering tips on how you can do so. Now, last year, 10,529 break-and-enters were reported to police, including those that took place in outbuildings. Jennifer Key with the RCMP says by practicing certain safety tips, you can lessen the chance of your home being broken into.
When you're outside and you're beginning your spring cleanup, it never hurts to take a look around to make sure, when we're done doing maintenance around our yard, always just make sure that we're putting any type of property away. That can be from a shovel to a rake, down to the most minute detail. And the reason why we're suggesting this is simply because these are crimes of opportunity, and crimes of opportunity are typically dealt with potential thieves, or as we call them, offenders, that want to come quickly onto your property, grab what they can, and leave quickly with minimal risk of being caught or seen.
Now, during the pandemic, with more Canadians working from home, Stats Canada says police-reported crimes were down by 195,000 incidents in 2020 compared with 2019. But there were still well over 2 million criminal code incidents reported, including a large number of B&Es. A trial continued today for a man and a son accused of killing 2 Métis hunters. Roger Bilodeau and his son Anthony have pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder. Jacob Sansom and Maurice Cardinal were found dead on a rural road near Glendon, northeast of Edmonton, in March of 2020. A lawyer for Bilodeau and his son say they believe the hunters were thieves and later shot them in self-defense during a confrontation. A volunteer-based program in Lethbridge called The Watch continues to make the rounds of the downtown core, assisting locals while also providing a level of safety for some who may need a walking partner. As BCN's Angela Stewart explains, the program launched by the Lethbridge Police Service has developed quite a bit since it began 3 years ago.
Well, they are the eyes and ears for the Lethbridge Police, Fire and EMS, and everyday volunteers of the Watch program patrol the downtown streets, helping out members in the community, including the city's most vulnerable and even business owners. We help them to connect to services that are a bit harder for them. So if they don't have a cell phone, we could provide them with a cell phone. We also advocate for them and do referrals.
When it comes to helping businesses around the downtown, team lead Shauna Bolduc says volunteers will conduct business and location checks.
That's usually when they're having some issues around their business, whether that's loitering or negative behaviors. We can just kind of make a visual kind of deterrence around that location and just make sure that everything's running smoothly and we could help in the way we can.
Bolduc, who has been with the Watch since the very beginning, says being a part of the program has been one of the most rewarding careers.
You see a variety of things. You see people that are struggling and sometimes going through the best day of their lives or the hardest day of their lives, and being able to be there for them, advocate for them, and help them in any way that we can. When we first started the program, it was pretty rough. We were kind of unsure on what we were doing.
Since May of 2019, when the program began, the Watch volunteers have been able to expand their efforts.
We've now made those connections, we made those relationships, and now we know what we can provide, what we can do, and where to send people when we're not sure if we could help them any further.
Bolduc adds the program remains primarily hands-off when it comes to certain situations like needle collection.
Needles, we call a hotline that is amazing, and they come and pick those up. Other things like biohazard cleanup, we could also call another phone number to get that cleaned up as well.
In 2020, teams attended more than 4,000 events throughout the downtown and surrounding areas, when just last year that number rose to 6,500, with about 80 of those requiring assistance from LPS.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Federal Justice Minister David Lametti says he's saddened that David Milgaard, who spent 23 years in prison for crimes he didn't commit, died before Canada could set up an independent commission to review claims of wrongful conviction. Milgaard had met with Lametti to advocate for such a body.
I have received a report from former Justices Harry Laforme and Juanita Westmoreland Traore about the potential architecture, if you will, for this kind of commission. We're studying that right now, looking at the various alternatives that are presented in that report. But I can assure you that, excuse me for getting emotional, I can assure you that this will happen. David Milgaard died yesterday. I was profoundly saddened by the fact that he would not live to see this. I'd spoken with David and I assured him this would happen. I wish his mother were still here too. She died in 2020. I can assure you this will happen.
The province of Saskatchewan is banning alcohol and recreational cannabis in its provincial parks this May long weekend. Cottages, rental cabins, and any business serving alcohol in licensed establishments and parks are not affected. Provincial parks are set to open for the season on Thursday. The province is also warning people of black bears, which are leaving their dens in search of food as the weather warms up. The Manitoba government says it is monitoring a precipitation system that could affect the southern portion of the province later this week. The province says the system could bring up to 50 millimeters of rain to the area by Friday. South of Winnipeg, the Red River has begun to recede, but still resembles a large lake in many areas covering farmlands and roads. In western Manitoba, around the Parkland region, flash flooding from heavy rain last week, combined with melting snow, has covered roads and damaged bridges and culverts. As for our weather here in southwestern Alberta, it has been very warm and dry. Now, if you've been praying for some rain here, your prayers may finally be answered. Full weather details are on deck. Well, it was slightly cooler today in many parts of southwestern Alberta. More of the clouds are rolling in, and there's even a potential of rain later this week. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, some of that much-needed moisture may arrive by Thursday?
Yes, Thursday should be our rain day. It should last through Thursday evening and into Friday as well, with a 60% chance of showers on a Friday. As for tomorrow, Wednesday, not so much with the moisture as the wind. We're looking at 50-kilometer-per-hour wind gusts up to 70K at times, 17 degrees the high. And then we get into Thursday and Friday with the rain at 10 degrees, 13 the high on Saturday with mainly sunny skies. On Sunday, up to 19 and up to 21 degrees on Monday with partly cloudy skies. So we are sticking mainly around seasonal temperatures, sometimes a little bit below that. Average high for this time of year, 18. Average low, 4 degrees. 31 was our high temperature on this day back in 2006. And it was -3 on this day in 1955. 5:44 is when the sun rose this morning. Our sun set this evening at 9:12 p.m., giving us 15 hours and 28 minutes of daylight. Loving it. Okay, on the west coast tomorrow, we're seeing rain showers throughout the day in both Victoria and Vancouver. Windy conditions as well. We're looking up to 80 kilometer per hour gusts in Victoria, 14 the high there, 10 the high in Vancouver, up to 60 gusts in Vancouver. Edmonton, looking at showers, especially later on in the day, 11 degrees the high, 13 the high in Calgary tomorrow with a mix of sun and cloud. 13 degrees the high tomorrow in Saskatoon, looking at some showers there as well. Shower activity also in Regina tomorrow, 16 degrees the high. Winnipeg could see that risk of a thunderstorm tomorrow with a high of 13 degrees as well. As we look to the central portion of the country, Toronto, nice, beautiful, sunny skies, 15 the high there, 20 the high in Ottawa, 18 the high in Montreal with sunshine forecast for that area as well. So definitely a beautiful sunny day. Get out your sunglasses. Over on the East Coast, mix of sun and cloud, 15 the high, 14 in Halifax. Charlottetown looking at 12 degrees with a chance of showers, and shower activity also expected tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland with a high of 7 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Walmart reported stronger sales in the first quarter, but its profit took a beating as the retailer dealt with surging inflation on food and fuel. The U.S.-based company also cut its full-year earnings forecast. Walmart reported earnings of $2.05 billion U.S., or adjusted earnings of $1.30 per share. That was far short of what Wall Street had expected of $1.48 per share. Tesla CEO Elon Musk says his deal to purchase Twitter will not move forward unless the company shows proof that less than 5% of accounts on the platform are fake or spam. Musk made the comment on Twitter earlier on Tuesday. He spent much of the previous day in a back and forth with Twitter CEO Parag Agrawal. Agrawal explained his company's efforts to fight bots and how it consistently estimated that less than 5% of Twitter accounts are fake. Tim Hortons is launching a new French vanilla flavored chilled coffee called Biebs Brew. It's the latest marketing collaboration with singer Justin Bieber. Biebs Brew will be available beginning June 6th alongside a limited edition stainless steel tumbler co-created by the Biebs. Tim Hortons is also bringing back new Timbit flavors dubbed Tim Biebs for a limited time that originally launched last November. A marketing expert says collaborations are becoming more productive than traditional advertising as the singer can reach 236 million followers on Instagram with just one post. That's quite a bit. Now here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 284 points in the day to finish at 20,491. The Dow was up 431 points to 32,654. The S&P 500 was up 80 points to 4,088, and the Nasdaq was up 321 on the day to 11,984. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 69 cents to $113.51 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 36 cents to $8.31 US. Gold was down a cent to $18.15 US an ounce, and silver was even on the day at $21.63 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $15.92 per bushel, barley's at $10.34, canola's at $27.37, and corn is at $12.55 per bushel. Live cattle were down 18 cents to $133. Feeder cattle were down 23 cents to $157.18, and lean hogs were up $1.33 to $105.15. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.06 US. Recapping one of our top stories, the province is investing $5.3 million in various post-secondary institutions across southern Alberta. The funding will support around 184 new seats in programs such as agriculture, healthcare, science, and IT at the University of Lethbridge, Lethbridge College, and Medicine Hat College. Government officials say the Alberta at Work initiative is helping high-demand programs to meet labour demands. So who is leading when it comes to the leadership of the Conservative Party of Canada, especially following some of the recent debates? Political reporter Brian Lilly will have some insight for us shortly. But first, here's a look at some of the events happening in and around southwestern Alberta.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. The Superhero Circus is coming to town Saturday, May 21st at Exhibition Park in the South Pavilion. Watch soaring acrobats, lightning-fast jugglers, funny clowns, and a magical performance by a real-life transformer. Show times are 1:30, 4:30, and 7:30 p.m., and tickets can be purchased online or at the circus box office. For more information, visit circusfantastic.com. Lethbridge Sport Council is hosting SportFest 2022 on Saturday, May 28th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Service Sports Center. Come see the many exhibits representing all kinds of sports like curling, wrestling, boxing, gymnastics, and so much more. There'll be areas where you can try a variety of sports on ice, turf, court floor, and mats. Plus, you can take a turn on the climbing wall, and there will be a bike rodeo where young cyclists can learn riding skills to stay safe on the streets. So much to see and do, and it's free for the whole family. For more information, visit lethbridgesportcouncil.ca. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
The CPC leadership candidates continue to campaign across the country. Will Pierre Poilievre win? What about Leslyn Lewis or Jean Charest? To discuss the Conservative leadership race in a little more detail is political reporter Brian Lilley joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, let's talk about some of the recent debates. We haven't chatted since the leadership debate in Edmonton, and we've had another one since then. What are your thoughts? Who came out on top?
Well, I didn't like the first debate in Ottawa because they were so angry and nasty towards each other. I think I mentioned that it would turn off voters, people checking in for the first time who were saying, well, I don't know about this Trudeau guy. Let me check out the Conservatives. You would run away from that going, holy cow, who are these people? The one in Edmonton I thought was good. It was, Tom Clark kept them, some oddities in the format, like the sad trombone, if you mentioned someone. Paddles were a little weird, but Tom Clark kept them to the topic at hand. And the number one complaint I always hear from viewers and readers when it comes to debates is, how come you guys ask them about A and they answer with B? And he kept them on topic. So I like that. And the personal attacks, whether between Lewis and Poilievre or Poilievre and Charest, they weren't there. I want to hear about policy, and I want Conservatives to come together to beat Justin Trudeau. I don't want them to damage each other so badly that it helps Trudeau and the Liberals in the next election. So I thought it was a much better debate format in terms of holding them to the topic at hand. And, I didn't mind some of the light stuff like, hey, what if you've been binge watching? Or what's the latest book? What music do you like? Kind of humanizes people. When I do long form interviews with politicians, I always love to throw in a question or two like that. Lets people know that the politician on stage, they're human as well. They eat, they sleep, they put their pants on one leg at a time.
It's funny you should mention that. We had the chance to interview Andrew Scheer at the Calgary Stampede. Open forum there. It was actually right on the midway. And I asked him what his favorite muscle car was. And I gave him the options of a Cuda, a Mustang, and a Camaro. And it was quite funny, his response. I think he went with a Mustang, the Fastback 428 Cobra Jet. Brian, let's circle back to the attacks for just a moment here. I mean, we see them all the time on social media. Pierre Poilievre taking shots at Jean Charest, calling him a liberal, Patrick Brown and Leslyn Lewis. I mean, everybody's attacking everybody. That can't be really healthy for the party. And like you said, people are looking into this thinking, is this a kingdom divided against itself? How can it stand?
Well, it's going to be difficult if it keeps up because you've got months to go, right? I mean, this keeps up until next September. Then what they've effectively done is whoever wins, and right now, let's face it, Poilievre's out in front, but if, could be somebody else, but they are writing the attack ads for the Liberals. The Liberals did this after the 2006 election, and the Conservatives dined out on it for years. Stephen Harper had ads ready to go as soon as they picked a new leader. I worry that that's what is going to happen. And, as you said, a house divided against itself. I've already heard some people say that, people who are supporters of Pierre Poilievre, if anybody else wins, then they're leaving and they'll go to the People's Party of Canada or somewhere else. But I've also heard that, people like Jean Charest have to be forced out of the party. Why? You win by addition, not subtraction. If you want to have a purity test, well, then you're going to have a very small club.
And I think with voters as well, when they see all of the personal attacks going on, and it's like, yeah, I can't stand that guy. You're right, Poilievre. Jean Charest's terrible. And then let's say Poilievre wins, and then they're all buddies now. It's like, well, how much credibility is there in all of that? Like, was this all just a show? Like, what's going on here, right? So I think a lot of voters have issues with that. Now, one of the main key issues in the race, and one of the reasons Erin O'Toole was ousted, is where Conservatives stand on the carbon tax. Now, Brian, you and I have chatted about that in depth. You recently reported that Pierre Poilievre has run 3 times on a platform of bringing in a carbon tax?
Yeah, so what prompted me to write that was Poilievre saying, like, Jean Charest brought in cap and trade, and Patrick Brown proposed a carbon tax in Ontario. I'll fight them everywhere. And I thought, well, no, you've run multiple times. Now, I thought it was just twice. Turns out I went back through the old Conservative platforms, and it's 3 times. In 2004, his very first election when he won. In 2008, when the Conservatives won in the middle of the financial crisis, they ran on cap and trade. And in 2008, the Harper government's view was we should have a cap and trade system led by the provinces that work with American states. And, it should be a North American-wide cap and trade, putting a price on carbon. That was very important to them. It was in government documents. It was in their platform that Poilievre ran on. Well, guess who was Premier of Quebec in 2008 and did what the federal Conservatives wanted him to do? Jean Charest. He brought in a provincial cap and trade system and joined the Western carbon market with a bunch of U.S. states and eventually Ontario and Nova Scotia. And I think at one point Manitoba was in. So, it's odd that he's attacking him on that when that used to be federal Conservative policy that he ran on twice. And then in 2021, of course, he's run on a carbon tax in an election. Patrick Brown never has, because he never got the chance to. He proposed it. So my point in writing the column, I've been accused of attacking Pierre Poilievre, is no, my point is, here's the truth. Here's where they've all stood in the past. Now let's have an honest discussion. Is this the right way to go? The wrong way to go? Should it be cap and trade? Should it be a carbon tax? Should it be nothing at all? Should it be, a price on large emitters, which is what Andrew Scheer ran on and what Stephen Harper and the Harper government eventually moved towards? But just yelling, you supported this, you did that, it's not a good debate. It goes to more of what you and I were discussing earlier about turning people off.
With the fact that Pierre Poilievre is saying that he's against the carbon tax right now, is it just a matter of giving us what our itching ears are dying to hear?
No, I don't think that he would bring in a carbon tax if he were elected, either as a Conservative leader or Prime Minister. I think the party has moved on. Would he necessarily repeal the Trudeau carbon tax? It depends. I mean, Jean Charest is saying he will, but he's also saying he'll deal with carbon emissions in a different way, but not a tax on consumers. So, that's the type of thing that we need to hear. Okay, you say you're against the carbon tax. Are you going to repeal it? If you're going to repeal it, are you going to bring in something else? And if so, what's that something else? Don't just tell me I'll scrap this. Okay, but are you going to replace it with something that might be worse? I didn't think you could get worse than Justin Trudeau's carbon tax until I saw Erin O'Toole's, where you got Erin bucks. Depending on what you spent, you could earn points to buy a hemp purse or bamboo straws based on your government points. I never understood that. But so I want to hear what's next, not just what did you oppose before.
Brian, Ontario's election campaign continues. Do you think much has changed, or will the PCs under Doug Ford be reelected come June 1st?
It was a very short election campaign period, just 30 days, Hal. There was the previous, campaigning going on, but the official campaign period is just 30 days. And we're 2 weeks in. We've had 2 debates and not much in the way of movement. One poll will say the PCs are down a little bit or the Liberals are up a little bit. The Liberals are still below 30% in most polls. They're fighting for second place with the NDP, and the Conservatives are consistently in majority territory. So Doug Ford is most likely going to, win back power. There are a couple of splinter parties from people who left the PC caucus that went on to form New Blue, as well as Ontario Party. Combined, they're polling at about 3%, 4%. And where they will be strongest, the PCs are also going to be strongest. So I don't see much change at the end of this election. unless something happens in the next 2 weeks. As I always say, my caveat until the day of voting is campaigns matter. But on that note, advance polls start on Thursday. And you got 10 days of advance voting. Every single party is going to be pushing for advance voting so that the votes are locked in. That's why they like those, so that the votes are locked in and somebody can't change their mind if something happens in the last week of the campaign.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep our eye on that. And what's happening here in Alberta with UCP Leadership Review, the results should be made known tomorrow. Brian, the unofficial border crossing Roxham Road is back in the news. Now, you recently wrote in the Toronto Sun about a huge increase in numbers and the claim by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that there's really no point in trying to stop the illegal border crossings there. Why not?
Well, he says, well, if we close Roxham Road, they'll just cross somewhere else. That's not true. We've got years of data on how many people were intercepted by the RCMP. That's what they're called. So they're listed as both asylum seekers and RCMP interceptions. And Roxham Road, of course, is that dead-end road. Used to be able to just drive from New York State into Quebec, no border checks. That was a long time ago. It's a dead-end road now, but people take a cab to the end of the road and then walk across the border into Canada. It used to be in the tens per year. Now it's 100 a day. And this all started in 2017 with that tweet Justin Trudeau put out trying to show that he was more caring than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was going to tell people who had been in Haiti from Haiti, who had been in the States for years, to go home, just like Canada had done years before under Trudeau. He put out this tweet saying, welcome to Canada. We, welcome everyone. All of a sudden, you've got this influx of people, and they're not refugees from the United States. And they shouldn't be refugees to Canada, because by the time they get to us, they're in a safe third country, right? Instead, we've got people flying in from Nigeria, Pakistan, and other countries where the majority of the cases are turned down. At best, it's a 41% approval rating. From places like Nigeria, it's 25% approval rating. But they fly into JFK Airport in New York City. They take a bus up to Plattsburgh, New York, and then there's a cab waiting for them to take them to the Canada-US border. We got rid of this during COVID, by the way. It disappeared in March 2020 when the COVID shutdowns happened. Now it's back to about 2,500 a month. There's been probably getting close to 10,000 so far. And the Premier of Quebec, Francois Legault, says, look, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't afford it. Because the province is required to provide housing, social assistance, enroll the kids in school. And the feds, it's their problem, and the province of Quebec is paying for it. Francois Legault said, please shut this down. And Trudeau said, no, we can't do it. C'est la vie.
Isn't there also a danger of some extremists making their way into Canada? Like you said, from countries that are quite volatile and have, histories of extremism, making their way to the United States and they're just crossing the border?
There's that. There's the fact that, because of the rules in the US are different than Canada, there are going to be people who are coming in who aren't vaccinated. We don't let you in if you're not vaccinated. But, people crossing there, that's not a requirement that they have to face. So, if you've got a family member that lives in a foreign country and they're not vaccinated, they can't come and visit you. But if they cross at Roxham Road, declare themselves asylum seekers, they can. There are so many issues with this. There have been criminals caught over the past, 5 years at Roxham Road. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are more on the way. Like I said, there's about a 25 to 40% approval rating for people who are claiming refugee status. That is not very high. But if you bring that up to the government, they try and just say that you're against immigration or against refugees. That's not the case. This is just not how you run a system.
Brian, Canada's responsible gun owners have been angry about a potential gun registry. We got rid of a $2 billion fiasco a couple of years ago, and now there's something new coming in? Tell me a bit about that.
This is from legislation that was passed 2 years ago. I believe it was called Bill C-71. And I said at the time when I saw the text of the bill, I said, this will lead to a backdoor gun registry. The bill was one of these typical Trudeau gun control ones. They say they're going to deal with crime on the streets by regulating law-abiding gun owners. And so almost every measure within it was aimed at people who are already vetted by the RCMP, who've done their safety course, background checks, et cetera. It came up with things that already exist. Like if you're going to sell your gun, you have to ensure that the person you're selling it to in a private sale has a license. You're already required to do that. They've just codified it in a new way so that they can say, see, we're making them do this. But if you're buying a gun from your local gun shop, then that gun shop now has to keep a register of all sales, and they've got to keep it for years. Now, most gun stores do keep some sort of register for themselves, so they can know that, okay, well, Al came in, he bought this gun, you come in to get it fixed. They're keeping track of their inventory because they're under immense pressure and a lot of scrutiny. But now this is a formalized government requirement. The government says, well, you're going to, police will need a warrant to ask for this. It won't be abused. Nobody is believing the Trudeau Liberals on this. And the RCMP, just ask the people of High River, they've got a spotty record.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
The Alberta Rockies feed the headwaters of various rivers, including the Oldman, Crow's Nest, and Castle Rivers. Many of us living here in southern Alberta see a lot of these waters, if not every day, then often during our weekend excursions to the mountains and foothills. The watershed is vital for life in our region, not only supplying drinking water, but also water needed to feed our livestock and crops. Now, there's a group working to protect these waters called the Oldman Watershed Council. Shannon Frank is with the council and joins us today here in Lethbridge. Shannon, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much.
Now, so many of us here in southern Alberta enjoy the waters flowing from the Rockies on our weekends and exploring, but many of us also don't realize that groups like yours look out for the quality of this local watershed. Can you explain?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. So the Oldman Watershed Council is a registered charity and nonprofit based in Lethbridge, and we're a collaborative forum working with everybody in the watershed. So we have 19 sectors on our board, and it's all about working together to protect the watershed and make sure that it's healthy enough to support our industries and our communities so that we can enjoy the benefits now, but also for future generations. So as a nonprofit, we do a lot of work with all levels of government, our First Nations communities, our cities, our towns, and basically everyone. No matter who you are, you have a role to play. And our goal is to really engage people from all walks of life so that our whole community is committed to protecting watershed health.
So Shannon, can you really educate us as to what a watershed is and why it's so important?
A watershed is an area of land that all drains into a common water body. So in this case, the Oldman River. But it can be at a smaller scale, like the Crow's Nest River watershed, or it can be at a larger scale, like the Hudson Bay watershed that we are a part of, because our river flows east through the prairies to Lake Winnipeg and into Hudson's Bay. So everything that's happening on that land actually impacts the nearby creeks and rivers and lakes, and it all comes together. And so that's the idea of the watershed is a part of all of that land and all of the people on that land. So we all have to work collaboratively to protect it.
Now, when you actually look at a map, the watershed can look a little similar to the circulatory system of the human body. Do you think that's kind of a good comparison?
Yeah, for sure. Like in our bodies, everything's working together to keep us healthy. Similarly with the watershed, we have to work together, and our rivers and our lakes and our creeks work together to maintain ecological function and habitat and filtering water and that sort of thing, so that everything is definitely connected. And that's why it's so important that us as humans are doing our part to support the natural ecosystems and the fish and the wildlife and the trees, because we are all connected and we depend on each other to have this function so that we can enjoy the benefits of that, like clean water, clean air, and healthy, abundant wildlife, and so on.
So like a human body, a watershed could become sick or even misaligned?
Yeah, exactly. We've seen instances of this where there could be a spill or too much pollution or, too much land disturbance, and a watershed can become unhealthy. And we can do assessments to see what the health is. So we have indicators in science that we use to assess. In our last report was in 2010, was a very large scale state of the watershed report. We gave ratings of good, fair, and poor to each major section of the watershed: the prairies, the mountains, the foothills, and the southern tributaries. And we find there is a range. Some areas are healthier than others, and some really need our attention.
Now, the Old Man watershed, Shannon, may start in the mountains west of Lethbridge, but how far east feels the impact of this watershed?
Well, it meets up with the Bow River at the forks just outside Grassy Lake, and from there becomes the South Saskatchewan River. So it does flow quite far, all through Alberta and southern Alberta, and then into Saskatchewan, Lake Winnipeg, and then out to Hudson's Bay. So a large area is impacted, and we are at the top, we're at the headwaters. So, we do have a bit of an extra responsibility to maintain the health and function so that everybody downstream benefits and can enjoy those same necessities that we rely on. So as more creeks and rivers flow in, our impact might be diluted a little bit along the way by other water coming in, but we certainly are at the headwaters, which are the most important source for Western Canada.
It sounds like the lives of millions of people depend on this water that flows through many parts of Alberta. Let's talk about more specifically who relies on the watershed.
Of course. So we all do, right? Like our cities and towns withdraw our drinking water from nearby creeks and rivers. And then we put back our wastewater into those same creeks and rivers. So, we're literally using it day in and day out. And then our whole, like a large portion of our economy in Southwest Alberta is dependent on agriculture, and specifically irrigated agriculture, where we need that water to grow the crops and feed the livestock that, is benefiting our jobs and our economy. So without that, we would have much less jobs and less people would be able to live here, because the industry would just be a lot smaller without irrigation. And in times of drought, like we saw this year, I guess last year now in 2021, the drought was very severe for dryland farmers who didn't have irrigation. It's very tough to be a dryland farmer, and we need that water. And there was just an economic study that came out that showed that, billions of dollars come out of the irrigation sector every year. And then also, of course, for our environment, for our fish and our wildlife, our trees, water filtration that we get for free from our wetlands and our ecosystems, the places that we enjoy in the mountains for recreation. It's all dependent on water, and more specifically on the snowpack that we get in the mountains. It's not the rain in the summer so much, it's actually the snowpack in the mountains that we depend on. And so we're always watching, how much is there. The government measures it, they report it because it's so critical.
Let's talk about some of the coal mining in the eastern slopes of the Canadian Rockies. A lot of controversy there. You've even had country stars like Corb Lund from our area and Paul Brandt getting involved, saying it's going to impact our water quality. The Old Man Watershed Council is dedicated to protecting this watershed. What are your thoughts when it comes to coal mining in the Rockies, how that impacts the water?
We are a resource for decision makers. So we provide unbiased information, scientific research, and concerns and questions that we're hearing from stakeholders. So that's what we did when the coal debate erupted. And we continue to provide information about the potential impacts of coal mining. And we also shared information about some of the positive potential impacts of job creation. And so, our role is not to make judgments, and we don't take sides on large development projects. Our focus is on providing that trustworthy information and looking at the science to see what we can learn from past research, from past projects. And then we encourage the public and our decision makers to learn from that information and come to their own conclusions. And we provided input directly to the Alberta Energy Regulator and the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada through written submissions and presentations. And so we really pointed out that there could be, significant environmental impacts from coal mining along the eastern slopes. And we also mentioned, that there can be economic benefits. So we really try to be a forum for discussion and debate. And similar with any other large project, there's going to be opinions on all sides, and we encourage that discussion based on fact and science.
Now, collaborative projects are an important part of what your council does. Let's talk about some of those collaborations.
For sure. So we work with everybody, and it's all about, trying to encourage everybody to kind of step up and do a little bit more for the benefit of the watershed and the future generations that will be depending on it. So we have a large project in the headwaters where we work directly with backcountry recreationists to adopt good practices, steer clear of water, not driving through the creeks when they're recreating, picking up garbage, leave no trace principles, that sort of thing. And then we also do a lot of restoration projects. So planting willows to reinforce stream banks, planting trees and shrubs to, bring back the vegetation in a damaged area so that it can function again. We also have partnerships with our Indigenous communities to do similar work of restoration and engaging communities. Also with farmers and ranchers, we support stewardship projects on private land. A lot of what we do is provide funding for riparian fencing and off-stream watering units so that cattle is kept out of the water, and it also benefits the operation. It means they're not, in a wet area, and they have better weight gain. So, no matter who you are, if you're urban, if you're rural, if you're recreating, there's always something you can do. And so our job is to support those good practices and help people make the good choices and make it easy for them, maybe with some funding or resources.
Do beavers have much of an impact in the Oldman watershed area?
Yes, beavers are a bit controversial sometimes, but they are a very important part of the ecosystem for holding back water on the land, especially during floods. Those natural beaver dams that they build help us during drought so that there's more water retention on the land, especially wetlands that are connected to groundwater. And they also hold back water in times of flood, so they're very important.
How does the Oldman Watershed Council interact with recreation groups?
We worked collaboratively to educate recreationists, so like attending races and events, talking to them about good practices, things they can do when they're out on the land. I mentioned a few, like steer clear of water, and we also promote, putting out your fires, you know, there's a lot of things that recreationists can inadvertently do when they're out there. We don't you know, realize how much impact we have sometimes because we think we're just one person, but we're actually one of thousands that are doing the same thing. So our impact adds up. So we ask people to stay on designated trails, you know, not go through the water, and basically leave no trace.
One more question for you. What about the impact of the watershed on agriculture? Let's talk a bit about that.
Well, the watershed supports agriculture, of course. You know, the soil that is growing the crops and feeding the cattle is critical. We, you know, wouldn't exist without that good soil that we have. And then the water that's feeding the livestock and watering the crops. And it's also, you know, feeding our processing industry. A lot of what we have here is based on the processing side, and we need water for that too. So it's all connected, and we all can do our part to do a little bit more, step up a little bit, to make sure the watershed health is protected.
Shannon Frank is with the Oldman Watershed Council. Shannon, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.